Let's take a quick look back as this past October we celebrated Co-op Month. This is a unique opportunity for cooperatives to communicate their values and their principles and how they conduct their business. We recently sat down with Rocky Weber from the Nebraska Cooperative Council. Appreciate your time, Rocky. This year's theme is owning our identity. What does that mean to Nebraska cooperatives?
Well, ownership is really one of the fundamental unique features about the cooperative business model. You know, this is a business model where the people who use the cooperative, the farmer patrons, actually own the cooperative. They sit on the board of directors of the cooperative. They participate in the economic benefits of ownership by having any excess profits returned to them. And so that it really is the hallmark of what a cooperative is, and that's owning our identity.
That unique structure allows the cooperatives in the state of Nebraska to do some pretty unique things, and that's one of them I think comes to mind is multi-generational aspects of it, of serving the different producers. A lot of families can look at 3 different generations, perhaps even 4 at this point, that have been dealing with local cooperatives.
Well, and the co-ops themselves, because they're run by families and generations of families, have a generational outlook to them as well. You know, Bryce, our first cooperatives in Nebraska were incorporated over 100 years ago at the beginning of the last century, and many of those legacy cooperatives continue to operate today in Nebraska. And normally, when we look at the business climate, a new business today has a chance of surviving somewhere between 15 and 20 years. And so when you think about these generational cooperatives that have been there to serve generations of families, they've been able to weather, because of the owner's equity, the farmer equity in these companies, they've been able to weather the economic storms. They stay in the marketplace. They don't come in and serve the farmer when they can make money and then leave when they can't. They are there for the long haul to serve the members of those cooperatives.
As we look at the total number of farmer-owned cooperatives in the state of Nebraska, the number is a little bit more than 30, but there are a lot of locations, a lot of small towns across Nebraska, aren't they?
They are, and really they're kind of the backbone of our rural economy. So there might only be roughly 31 cooperatives, ag cooperatives in Nebraska today, but there are over 400, I think right at 401 locations across the state of Nebraska, and we've actually seen an increase in locations as ag cooperatives determine where best to put new facilities, generational facilities to serve generations of farmers, where they determine where to best put them. We've seen a growth in locations in the state of Nebraska to serve our communities.
As we celebrate Co-op Month, as we did this past October, it's always a good time to look at the economic footprint of these co-ops. And I know you guys track the stats year to year to see how big of an impact. You mentioned kind of the backbone of some of these local communities. What numbers do you have to share this year, Rocky?
Well, you know, our farmer-owned cooperatives across the state of Nebraska employ just over 5,000 people with a $380 million statewide payroll. That's huge in rural Nebraska to have those entities to provide that type of job opportunities, jobs with great benefits, great pay. Serving about 55,000 farmers. Now, there's only 45,000 farmers in the state of Nebraska, roughly, but many farmers belong to one or more cooperatives, and so they are considered owners of all those cooperatives. Last year in Nebraska, our farmer-owned cooperatives returned cash economic and equity economic payments to our farmers to the tune of about $138 million. This is either cash or equity right back into rural Nebraska, farmers who live around rural communities, and really provides the economic backbone for these rural communities. In addition to that, our farmer-owned cooperatives reinvested in their property, plant, and equipment, about $226 million. Again, most of these investments in our rural communities in the form of fertilizer terminals and shuttle trains and all sorts of equipment to serve the farmers' needs. Agriculture is changing a lot, and the ag co-ops have to change with them. Finally, I want to mention that our farmer-owned cooperatives last year, from a local standpoint, each cooperative collectively gave about $3 million back to their local communities in charitable contributions, supporting their local fire departments, supporting their local school organizations, youth sports teams, you name it, supporting their local communities. And why? Because they're owned by the farmers that live and work and have a stake in those communities.
Well, Rocky, as you mentioned, agriculture is always changing across the heartland. And to that point, I'm curious your thoughts on why co-ops and cooperatives are they have the right structure to be able to last for the next 50, 100 plus years?
It's because of the members' equity that the members have in the cooperatives. As cooperatives make money, they spend money in three ways. They'll reinvest in property, plant, and equipment, and one important piece of that is this generational aspect. They're not spending money on assets that will last for 2 years. They're spending money on assets that will last for 30 years. The next thing they do is they give back cash patronage, and they support the farmers in giving back cash patronage. And then the final thing is that really allows farmer cooperatives to stay in that marketplace is the members' equity. That provides the ability for the farmer-owned cooperatives to weather the economic storms, weather the weather in Nebraska, and stay in the marketplace even if it's not profitable to do so, because they're backed up by the farmer's equity. And the farmers, Bryce, are not looking for a return on investment. They're looking for the goods and services. And so the cooperatives don't have to satisfy shareholders and provide a return on investment, which is very different than a for-profit company, whereas a for-profit company wants to come into the marketplace when it can return money to their investors, but they will leave the marketplace if they cannot return money to their investors. And that's the big difference.
It's a good point, Rocky. I appreciate you coming in, sharing a little bit more about the co-ops in Nebraska.
Happy to do it, Bryce. Thanks.